Welcome to the Punting is Winning podcast. Just two fans talking all things Hawkeyes. Here are your hosts, JD and Keith.
Welcome back, Hawkeye fans, to Punting is Winning, the All Iowa podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Keith. That's my co-host, JD. And today we're going to cover the Big Ten media days from last week. You watched the 3 days worth of introductory press conferences for each coach. Yes. I didn't have the time. I did hear Kirk Ferentz's, and I did see the disasterful opening press conference for Deshaun Foster, how terrible that was. Other than that, I'm going to kind of rely on you to bring us home on that. But first, let's talk question of the week from last week. Our question was, who in the modern era of Iowa football, who was the first round draft pick for either Hayden Fry, Kirk Ferentz, whichever? And either people didn't listen or didn't know and didn't want to pipe a guess in there, which would have been a total guess. But the first round draft pick in the modern era of Iowa football was Ron Hallstrom in 1982. He went first round, number 22 pick to the Green Bay Packers. He's had a 10-year career with Green Bay, and I think he had a couple of years at Philly. I didn't even remember Ron Hallstrom.
I just remembered the name. I don't know that I could pick him out of a lineup either.
Yeah, I couldn't either. But anybody ever asks you who was the first round pick out of Hayden Fry's tenure, that would be the answer. And that was 1982. I was 11 years old, so
would have been kind of nice to have somebody at least try to guess an answer.
Yeah,
a lot of interaction with the listeners. So if you guys want to interact, if you want to just contribute to the show at any point, if you want us to mention your name, we'll do it. If you don't want us to, that's fine. You can say, hey, here's the answer I believe, but don't use my name, and we'll just say, hey, somebody got the correct answer, and
we'll give you a pseudonym.
Well, yeah, just say listener number whatever.
Yeah, Rock fan number 1.
Yeah.
So that was last week's question. We got a brand new question of the week at the end of the show here. So let's dive right into the media days from last week. I'll start with Kirk Ferentz, what we learned, what we didn't learn. To me, it was a typical Kirk Ferentz press conference. A lot of could be a good football team. It's kind of the same with him each year. Talking about the guys that were replaced. Obviously, replacing a punter like Torrey Taylor is going to be a task, but got a lot of pieces returning. We did find out that Cade McNamara is 100% and full go at this point. And,
Brown's going to be suspended.
Yep, Caleb Brown suspended for the first game for his indiscretion. And I think we got the 2 deeps as well, which we could talk a little bit about that. It was a couple of surprises. I think people were surprised that Brendan Sullivan was listed as a 3. I wasn't, because he's not even taken a practice snap at the University of Iowa in front of a coach. So
I'd say
that to me didn't seem
right.
Yeah, by fall camp time. Yeah, first week of fall camp, it'll be McNamara 1, Sullivan 2. Yeah, in a perfect world, it'd be Linus 2 and Sullivan 3, and that shows that Marco has made some steps. So and that's possible. It's possible. We don't know what all's gone on in the off season here. We thought he looked pretty decent in the spring practice. Not the statuesque performance that we saw most of last year from the starting quarterbacks. So, I'm hopeful. And we did hear a little bit about Tim Lester just being embraced by the players, how he's really fit in well. Like to hear that. And I like the fact that it sounds like he's got full autonomy of the offense right now. And Kirk's kind of just working with the offensive line, which is a good thing, because you think back to the times when Iowa had a good offensive line or a stellar offensive line, he had his hand in that a little bit more. And I think that's a good thing to be able to get him back in that. And teaching that because that's what he does.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
Well, I wrote down bullet points, and I can go over a few of these for Iowa. They said Iowa, Kirk Ferentz in his 26th season, or going into his 26th season, and I was like, does that sound right? Is it 25th?
I think it's 25th.
Well, they said 26, so I wrote it down 26. But anyway, they went 10-4 last year. They lost in their bowl game to Tennessee. They have 17 returning starters, which is the most of the Big Ten. I think somebody else has 17 also, but I gotta write that down later. Tim Lester's the new OC. Of course, everybody knows that. Kirk's 4 wins shy of 200.
Yeah.
At Iowa now. And I also had Cade as number 1 quarterback going into the fall.
Yeah, and
That's
I think
really
I think on the bingo card we also might have had Kirk mentioning something from 40 years ago, which he brought up his 45 years at Iowa. So I think that's kind of a staple of every press conference. He has something to say about his prior stint at Iowa before taking over as a head coach, which is fine. I mean, it shows you've got the culture and you embrace the Iowa culture and you embrace the University of Iowa as your home.
Mm-hmm.
When you can bring up things of, hey, my first timer here, and I came back. So kudos to him on that. But it's one of those things that we always put it on. I have a bingo card. We have a bingo card during basketball season of things that we know the announcers are going to talk about, and get a spot in your bingo card, and first person in our house gets bingo.
Yeah, there's also people that do drinking games like that too. How many times, every time that they mention Kirk Ferentz or the punter at Iowa, Tory Taylor's name or something, then you got a drink. It's just, there are a lot of fun games. People do it that way. And there's some of them that I just don't know I'd want to do that. It's just,
some of them you'd
feel real good the next day. I'm telling you.
You wouldn't remember the rest of the game after the first 5 minutes.
Who won?
So.
I don't know. I was over there in the corner.
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's move on to some of the other highlights from those 3 days. Like I said, I'll lean on you. I will offer some input on what you had for bullet points and just whether I feel like I would agree with their coach or not. But a lot of times this coach speak in these things, so you're gonna you're not gonna go in there and say, well, my team stinks and I don't have a quality quarterback or anything. So you're never going to hear that. But we can be objective.
Yeah, really, that's you're going to get that. But I just wrote down, like, every time that somebody would come on, I would write down like interesting bullet points, things that we may have forgotten, or just little tidbits about the team that was mentioned. And that's really all I did. We can start at Illinois, which was the very first one out of the gates. Brett Bielema is in his 4th season at Illinois. Does it seem like he's been there that long? It seemed like longer to me, but
yeah.
He's one of the few Big Ten coaches that's returning a starting quarterback, Luke Altmaier. They have 10 starters returning, 5 on defense, 5 on offense. And they have a 2023 record of 5-7. They did not see a bowl game last year. Other than that, I didn't write down a whole lot.
I would say, based on what unless they had a stellar recruiting class or great player development, I wouldn't see much better than a 5-6 or 5-7.
Yeah, I think we did. We went through our predictions earlier, and I don't remember what I had Illinois.
I think you had 3-9 or 4-8, something like that for them.
It wasn't great.
Wasn't very good.
Yeah. So we rolled from Illinois right into Rutgers, and I have Greg Schiano is in his 5th season. Of course, this is his 2nd time at Rutgers. He coached earlier at Rutgers and then left and went to, I don't say the NFL, didn't he?
Could have been.
I think he did.
I don't remember.
The NFL, and then he came back and found his way back to Rutgers. They had a 7-6 season last year, and that was their first winning season since 2014. And they had a bowl game win on the Pinstripe Bowl over Miami, 31-24. They have 14 starters back, 6 offensive and 8 defensive. And their main returning starter is their running back, Kyle Monangai. And they also have a transfer from Minnesota, Ethan Kaliakmanis. So that's really not, there's not a lot more about Rutgers. I look for them to actually be, somewhat good this year. I think they've got a lot of guys coming back. They do have to replace the quarterback.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, Manis wasn't a stellar quarterback at Minnesota by any means, and I think Minnesota had a little more talent on the offensive side than Rutgers maybe has. But
other than running back, because I think this is one of the better running backs in the league is Anungai. So he's proven himself.
Minnesota usually has a pretty talented wide receiver core, and when you're talking a quarterback, that's what you're really focusing on is who he's got to throw to.
Well,
he's going to be. I think Minnesota had a better wide receiver core than Rutgers, so I don't know that Manis is going to be much of an improvement over what they had, which was Gavin Wimsatt, and he went somewhere else.
He's also going to have to learn Shiano's new system too.
Yeah,
he's going to have to do that. Get familiar with that very quick and early. I'm sure they're going over it now as we speak, even. So,
I think there's
ready.
I think there's a little bit too much put into that as to getting. It's terminology more than anything. It's once you get the terminology down, the quarterbacks they're the smartest ones out there. Basically, they're the ones that are going to be learning it fastest anyway. So I don't put a whole lot of. You've seen how many guys have you seen come in as true freshmen and just pick up an offense, and you compare down an offense to the quarterback. You 20, 25 plays, and you could probably get through a whole game with those 25 plays, just regurgitating them over the course of a game. And, if he's got them down pat, that's great. You don't need 400 plays.
Right. And I think a lot of times those plays, you get 25 like main plays, and then you can just change
formations,
do intricacies, and move people around to give it a different look, even though it's the same play. So that
formations, motion, but same routes. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Move guys to different spots. Yeah.
So after Rutgers, we moved on. Now Wisconsin. This will be Iowa's main. I think their second most difficult game of their season. And they Luke Fickell's in his second season. They were 7-6 in 2023. They did lose their ReliaQuest Bowl game to LSU 35-31. They have 10 starters also returning. They have a new quarterback named Tyler Van Dyke. He transferred from Miami University. And their main returning running back is Chaz Malusi. These didn't have a lot of yards last year, but he also had
to hurt.
Yeah, and he had to split some time up too with others. So
yeah,
if he's back and healthy, I'm sure he'll get the brunt of the running duties, and I'm sure he'll be right up there with some of the better running backs in the league. I think he's proven himself in previous years to be formidable. So yeah. I look for Wisconsin to be better than 7-6. I look for them to have 8, maybe 9 wins. They've got a tough schedule, but
you always got to count on the fact that Wisconsin's going to have a pretty good defense out there.
Yeah,
it's kind of they're kind of like Iowa last year. If they can find an offense, their defense is pretty good. I don't think their defense is as good as Iowa's, but you just got to have a good enough defense and good enough offense. You can get 8, 9 wins that way. I mean, Iowa showed last year you got a great stellar defense and no offense, and they got 10.
Yeah. And a couple of things we probably should mention too. The people that maybe are listening that aren't familiar with the Big Ten as we are, they're changing this year. There's no longer going to be divisions. There's no longer East and West. Everybody's together. Then not everybody's going to play everybody, obviously, because of the
unbalanced
size
schedules
of the conference teams. And one thing too that is not getting a lot of mention that people need to kind of maybe remember. There's going to be a 2-minute warning now at the end of each half, the first half, the second half. And it's very similar to the NFL. I'm not sure it's actually any different. But I haven't studied it to be 100% sure of that statement yet. But I think it's going to be very close to the same. Also going to be helmet communications.
Yes.
Between I don't know if it's the head coach or the offensive coordinator and the
it's the OC and the QB.
Okay.
From what I think that's what it is at Iowa. It's going to be. I know Tim Lester's talked about the communication through the helmet and with the quarterbacks, and they did that at spring practice as well. So.
Right. So that's just something that's going to be new this year. I think they messed with it a little bit in some of the bowl games last year.
I like
season. I think it's great too. It's like Kirk said, now we're catching up to the high schools.
Yeah,
because
well,
high school's been using it.
it also takes the Michigan cheating scandal out of the equation, stealing signs too. So,
Well, Michigan will figure out a way to maybe hack into the frequency and learn everything.
yeah,
But anyway, we'll move on from there. But anyway, moving on to the fourth in day one was Northwestern. David Braun comes in his second year, replacing Pat Fitzgerald. They were 8-5 last year. He was also Big Ten Coach of the Year for 2023. They had a 14-7 win over Utah in the Las Vegas Bowl. They are returning Ryan Helinski, a senior quarterback, and they are also starting a first-year offensive coordinator at Northwestern.
and losing a quarterback with some experience.
I think they'll be not. I don't think they'll have.
They'll take a
good
step
season.
back.
Yeah, I think they definitely take a step back this year.
Plus, I think the caveat that needs to be mentioned with Northwestern is they don't have a home field this year. I mean, they do. It's just not. It's not Ryan Field that's being torn up. So they've got a makeshift field down by the water, I think, and so that's going to be a little bit of a different scenario for them. A little bit tougher draw, maybe a little harder to, a little less people. Right. I don't know. You don't get that true home field advantage in that situation.
Well, being Iowa biased like we are, it's a good thing we have Iowa. The Iowa Northwestern game is in Iowa City, so we don't have to mess going to a temporary or makeshift field, as you put it. Shall we move on? Purdue. Purdue, second-year coach Ryan Walters. They have 18 transfers in. They have 11 starters coming in, or 11 starters from last year's team. 6 offensive, 5 defensive, and returning a quarterback, which is one of the few in the Big Ten that's returning a quarterback. Hudson Card. I wrote down they also have new uniforms in 2024.
Oh, really?
Some different unis to look at.
Interesting.
They were 4-8 last year, and they didn't make a bowl game, obviously. I don't know. I see Purdue not doing much better than what they had last year. Maybe they might be able to sneak a 5th win. Their schedule's not as bad as some of them, so they might actually get to that 5th win. But I don't see them making a bowl game.
It's hard to get 18 transfers to gel. You know, when you've got to bring that many transfers in, and we've seen people do it before. You know, Kansas State did it back in the day. They were kind of transfer university, and
Iowa State does a lot of transfers in.
Yeah. Well, they do a lot more in basketball than football.
Well, they do football too, but yeah, basketball is mainly their big deal.
But yeah, you think about the fact that teams built their reputation off of doing that. So, you know, if you can do it, that's great. But if you don't get the right guys in and you don't have the right system for them, then bringing in 18 guys isn't going to really make a whole lot of difference. So I think, you know, maybe they do gel a little bit and they do get 5, maybe 6 wins. Be surprising. But I see a very similar track from last year. They were decent. They were a decent team. They weren't like a horrible 4-8 team.
Right.
But they weren't, you wouldn't look at them and go, oh, that's a 4-8 team that should have been 8-4. You know, maybe 5-7, 6-6.
They won the games they were pretty much supposed to win, or were right there, could have won, and they did win those. I just don't see that as their schedule comes out. I didn't see a lot more out of it that they could get as opposed to last year. So yeah, I think 5-7 might be the ceiling for them. But
yeah, I would agree.
Okay, moving on. Ohio State was the last team on day one. They are. Let me see. I didn't write down how many years that.
This is his 6th or 7th, 5th or 6th year.
I just noticed that I just wrote down that they had added a new offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, and a lot of you will remember him.
At UCLA.
Didn't he head coach at UCLA last year?
Yes.
So, I'm not sure if he was just getting out ahead of the law, so to speak, on that deal, but they were, we'll get to UCLA here in a little bit next. But I just wanted to mention a couple things. Travion Henderson is returning. They're 11-2 last year. They did lose the Cotton Bowl to Missouri. They didn't even score a touchdown. They went
Well, they
lost
didn't have a
14-3.
quarterback that game
And their
either.
quarterback was wrong. It was gone too. I was going to say they lost quarterback Kyle McCord to Syracuse, and they are the preseason pick to win the conference. So they'll be starting a new quarterback this fall. Right now,
It's a transfer in.
The presumed starter would be Will Howard. He's kind of the front runner for the job.
Didn't he come from North Carolina?
Kansas State.
Kansas State. Yes,
Kansas or Kansas
that's right.
State.
Kansas State.
But
that's right.
I have to agree that the talent level that Ohio State has is just a little bit above, just a bit above Oregon. So I think that having them tagged as number one in the conference, the presumptive conference champion, is probably correct. I don't know. I wouldn't argue with them. How's that? Just based on how they've been and what they've got. They've always seemed to have a top recruiting class or in the top 3 or 4 every year. And I don't know. They must have an unlimited amount of money for NIL, but they always seem to get the 5-star kids, which is fine. Just you got to make them winners too.
Yeah, I mean it's a situation we talked about it a while back. You could have if things break right, you could have 4 teams that are 11-1 in this conference.
Yeah, and if Iowa does end up 11-1, I really kind of hope they don't make the championship game because I'd hate to see them go 11-2 and miss the playoffs.
Yeah,
take that chance and miss the playoffs.
I think 11-2 they probably still make it
and make a championship game.
Yeah,
I would think you would, but that nothing's guaranteed with Iowa.
Because that means you were a 1 or 2 in the conference.
Well,
and they'll pretty much take the top 2.
I think they'll take 4 out of the conference. I think they'll take the automatic winner, and then I think they'll take 3 more. But I could be wrong about that. It depends on how other conferences teams are do. If Texas, Oklahoma, and Alabama are all one or 2 losses, and they're going to take maybe 4 or 5 out of there. So you take 4 out of the Big Ten. You take 4 out of that's 8 out of the 12. You're going to probably only going to take 1. Maybe if somebody has a really great year in the Big 12, you're going to take 2 out of there. That doesn't leave a lot for the ACC
and the Group of 5.
And the Group of 5 only get 1 maybe out of each.
So isn't the higher or plus Notre Dame?
Exactly. So
yeah,
it's we talked about how there's always going to be, especially with when they had 4, there's always going to be somebody left out. Well, I think you're going to see the same thing. There's going to be somebody that's number 13 that probably should be in.
Well,
I guess win more games and you'll be in. So that's the caveat and the cure for that situation. But so day 1 is in the books. Not a lot more to mention about that. Starting day 2 with UCLA.
Deshaun Foster.
And Deshaun Foster, in his first year, they were 8-5 last year under Chip Kelly. They did have an LA Bowl win over Boise State, 35-22. They have a 4th-year starting quarterback named Ethan Garbers.
He's a transfer out of Cal?
But he's a starter. He was a starter of the year. So he's a 4-year starter. Eric Bieniemy is the new offensive coordinator. He's a new hire for Deshaun Foster. And the only thing about Deshaun Foster that I want to mention is I think the guy's very intense. He's a very intense individual. And I think when he came into this press conference or the introductions, I'm not sure he understood what the format was. I think he should have watched the day 1 format and knew, but he didn't have a lot to say. He stumbled kind of a little bit. He struggled to get words out that he really wanted to say. And he finally just said, well, I'm just going to punt and say, here's what questions do you have? And he had, his whole thing was like 6 minutes long. And each coach is allowed or given 15 minutes, and some of them went over. 15 minutes, and some of them went over, but he didn't. He had 7 or 8 minutes, and that was it, and he was out. So I don't know how personable he is. I'm sure he's an intense coach, and they probably love him at UCLA. He just didn't come off that great.
I will say that I saw that introductory press conference, but I also saw him answer some questions later on, and it was a different person. It's like, he's out of the main view of 150 people. Now he's got like 5 people in front of him or 6 people, and he's a lot more comfortable. So and he talked about when he he played
played at UCLA.
Yeah, but he played coach somewhere else and had played in Iowa City, and so he was familiar with it and had never won there. So, he was a little more personable and a little more I maybe not as nervous to talk in front of people at that point.
More relaxed, yeah.
Yeah.
So, from UCLA, not a whole lot about them. We do have to go Iowa has to play UCLA out there. It's a Friday night game.
Mm-hmm.
We go to Iowa. We talked about Iowa just a little bit ago. I'm not sure there's anything more we really need to discuss about Iowa. We'll move on from them. Next was Michigan State. First-year coach Jonathan Smith came in from Oregon State. They were 4-8 last year. Obviously, didn't get a bowl game. They had 36 players that transferred out of the program. That's a lot. 36.
Yeah, and were they all scholarship players? There were 36 scholarship players, and he only had 85. That's
significant.
Very significant.
But they did have 24 players that transferred in. That's
a lot of them from Oregon State.
12. Yeah, most of them were from Oregon State.
Mm-hmm.
He seems like he's going to fit in okay, just from what I saw. He seems like he understands what's in front of him. And I think he understands that it's going to be, we're going to try to win now, but I'm not going to be crushed if we don't. But we're going to build the program, and we're going to build it the right way. And that's kind of what I got from him was, not really an arrogant, we're going to come in and just start winning right away. But, obviously the goal is to win. But I think he's more worried about building the program and building it up, and so that he can be more consistent year after year. But I don't have Michigan State doing much this year. I really don't. I have them 17th out of 18.
I'd probably put a little higher than that, but
yeah, I just don't see much out of them. New coach, basically new team.
But I mean, when you've got a lot of former players transferred in, I don't think he would have left Oregon State had the Pac-12 not disintegrated.
That's probably true.
So,
I
think that's, and of course goes to the Big Ten and can't get away from Oregon there either. So,
right, exactly. So, we moved on from Michigan State. We'll go to USC. Lincoln Riley's in his 3rd season. They have a new defensive coordinator. They need a new defensive 11 starters return. They were 8-5. They did have a Holiday Bowl win for the 23 season. I sensed just a little bit of arrogance in Lincoln Riley. I think he thinks that he's going to be able to take his Trojan team into whatever hostile environment the Big Ten has and succeed. I think he's going to learn, just like Nebraska did when they came in.
It's like Penn State.
You can be arrogant and you can come in and think you're going to do stuff, but I'm just a little nervous that he's going to get a little bit of slap in the face and a little bit of reality setting in. And I don't want to use that because I know that the WNBA girls always said that to Caitlin Clark. You're going to see reality. The one thing that I keep harping back to this, the one thing that I just bothers me more than anything is that USC's schedule is so light in the back end. They don't travel. Travel past the Rocky Mountains and past October the 19th. So you're not going to see USC in a cold weather game in Wisconsin or in Happy Valley. You're not going to see them playing at
least not this year
at the big house. Not this year. Hopefully next year. So I felt like they got kind of a softball toss to them. Not saying that their schedule is not difficult, that they have. But I'm just saying it's a lot more difficult when you have to travel to these cold weather areas when you are a warm weather team. And it really does make a difference. You can say it doesn't, but it does. It absolutely favors the home team if you're playing in a cold weather or warm weather environment. if you're a cold weather team like Iowa or Nebraska that plays in November, plays in 10 or 15, 20 degrees, and you ship them out to USC, does it bother them that much? No. They're used to it because they just got done playing in September, October,
Mm-hmm.
when it's nice. But you take USC out that's used to 85 degrees daily, even all the way up into October, November, or early November. And then you
70s
throw
even.
them into Wisconsin, Camp Randall, like let's say the middle of November,
With a
and
wind
it's
chill of
23 degrees
-5.
and it's spitting rain.
Wind chill of -5, yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a difficult one to adjust to.
Mm-hmm. But as you said, they got a softball toss to them, and they don't have to do that this year. Again, that's just this year.
Hopefully next year they'll be making some trips east in November.
Yeah,
we'll see. Okay.
but yeah, I agree with you on the arrogance side of that. From the things that I was reading, he did seem a little bit on the we're just gonna kind of walk in and do whatever we want to do, and that reality slap in the face is going to come pretty harsh for some of them.
Mm-hmm. And there's pundits have put Iowa and USC back and forth depending on who you look at for either 5th or 6th. Some of them have Iowa 5th and USC 6th. Some of them have USC 5th and Iowa 6th. So they apparently view them as very similar in their what they perceive would be their record and how they finish in the conference. Okay. Nebraska was next on the list for day 2. Matt Rule's in his second season. They have 17 starters returning also. Another one that had just like Iowa did. They were 5-7, missed a bowl game, and they have a new quarterback, Dylan Raiola, coming in 24, who's got a lot of accolades. We're going to see. He's going to start right. He's going to have to get right out of the gate. I mean, they open up with a couple of decent games, and then they have like UNI, I think, on the third game, or right, pretty close to the beginning of the season.
They have Colorado early.
Yeah, they do have Colorado early. So there's another one I think that they play that's not going to be super easy, but the rest of their schedule is going to be, not terrible bad, but it's not going to be easy either. So, Iowa getting him at the end of the season might not be the greatest for Iowa, or it could be, depending on how
my thing is I was just going to say, I'm going to go out on a limb and make a bold prediction that he's not starting against Iowa. He'll either be hurt,
right?
Because I think they're going to burn him out, and he's going to get hurt.
He's going to get hurt. Yeah, and Nebraska's not had their starting quarterback. Seems like at the end of the season for a couple of years. I think Adrian Martinez might have been the last one that started the last.
Oh yeah, bring him back, please.
Yeah, he had fumble fingers. He couldn't hold on to anything.
He thought that he took black shirts literally. He kept throwing them to him.
Yeah,
I think we had picked him off 3 or 4 times in one game. So yeah.
Yeah, he didn't perform well against Iowa. I didn't think.
No,
he got confused too easily about Iowa's coverages, which is easy to do. A lot of them do that. Moving on, I got Penn State next. This is the last team of day 2. James Franklin's entering his 11th season. Like him or not, he did have a shout out to Kirk Ferentz for his longevity and his coaching class at Iowa. So that was kind of nice to see. They were 10-3 last year. I predict they will be 10-3 or better this year, or better.
I'd say probably 11-2 would be.
I would say they're 11-2 or 11-1, depending on how the end of the season goes. Bowl loss last year in 23 to Mississippi, 38-25. They have a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator. And the new defensive coordinator was the old Indiana coach, Tom Allen. Did you know that?
No, and
they just hired him not very long ago. And I don't know if that's good or bad.
Wasn't overly impressed with him, but
Indiana wasn't a world beat or anything. They do have 15 returning starters, and they have a new special teams coordinator also. So they're really replacing a lot of coaching staff.
But they also do return a quarterback.
And they do return Drew Aller. Yeah, he's
probably an all Big Ten caliber quarterback.
Solid quarterback. Yeah, he's definitely he's put up So,
He's probably the cream of the crop of the returning QBs in the Big Ten.
I think that's probably correct. 100% correct.
Yeah.
I don't know. We talked about Penn State. I think they're going to be good. I think they're going to, and I don't think their schedule's all that tough. They don't have to play Oregon. I know that. I made the mistake of saying that they did, and they don't. I was mistaking Michigan. Okay. Day 3 started with Oregon. Dan Lanning is in his 3rd season at Oregon. They were 12-2 last year, and their only 2 losses were to Washington, who was the runner-up national champion. Fiesta Bowl win. They have a new quarterback, Dylan Gabriel.
Dylan Gabriel.
Yes.
Yeah, not Dylan Gabriel.
I think he's supposed to be like preseason MVP of the conference. I don't know. We'll see how it all plays out. They really have thrown a lot of accolades at him preseason wise anyway. We'll see. He's even a Heisman Trophy candidate at this point.
This is 3rd place. He was
We'll see.
Central Florida and then at Oklahoma.
Go to
now.
Oklahoma?
Oregon? Yeah, Central Florida, Oklahoma, and then Oregon.
Right. We'll see how he does. Big Ten's a lot different. And there's places that you've never been before. There's stadiums you don't know.
Not saying that's going to be the be all end all, and they're going to be 8-4.
Right. No, they'll be good. I think they're predicted to be 2nd in the conference behind Ohio State, and I think they'll probably end up playing Ohio State in the championship game. And that's the way I predicted it. It comes down to could be a turnover deal where just if you don't turn the ball over one more time, you'd win the game. So it's going to be that close. I think Oregon and Ohio State are just that good that they're that close.
You could swap them at any point during the season. I think
they're so close in parity. I don't know much more about Oregon than that. We'll see how they do. They've got a very difficult schedule. I do know that for the Big Ten.
They do have to come east in the winter or the late fall against Wisconsin.
Yeah, and November 19th, I want to say, it was the latest. So they do actually get to travel east in November. So they'll see some.
But it'll be different for them because they're Northwest is a little bit cooler than Southern California. So
yeah, they may see some snow in Wisconsin at that point. Who knows?
Yeah.
Next is Minnesota. PJ Fleck is in his 8th year. Like him or love him, or hate him, despise him, ignore him. That's what I do. He seems like a car salesman when he talks.
I read something on
fast and so like everything's so great.
I read something on the message boards. The guy was saying that he had a conversation with another coach, and PJ Fleck is literally will lock a kid in a room till he commits. Yeah, and that's why you've got guys that have committed to Minnesota. They just want to go home. Like John Wayne Gacy.
Right. I got a bullet point down here that they were 6-7 last year and actually won a bowl game. So they went to a bowl game at 5 wins. So they were I think they were the only team that went. And they're going to start a new quarterback this year. We don't know who that is. I wrote down here, it feels like PJ should be a pitchman for as seen on TV products.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote down.
Kind of reminds me of the Billy Blanks. Sham Wow guy
Mays,
too.
The Mays, Billy Mays.
Yeah, Billy Mays, there you go. Not Billy Blank, Billy Mays.
They are going to be bringing in 2 new coordinators, a defensive coordinator and a special teams coordinator. So they're going to have to, work with the defensive coordinator, get some things going on there. He's the only guy that took 15 minutes and turned it into 30 when he did his introduction.
Shocking.
So, I like I said, people like him. Some people like him. Some people don't. I don't necessarily, but I don't say that I dislike him as much as some of the others. He just
annoys me.
If he beats Iowa more often, I'd probably hate him more. But he only beats Iowa once every 10 years. So, yeah, he's like that bug on your shoulder. You just want to go like this. Get out of here, small fly.
He's too much about himself, and that bugs me. That's why I appreciate people like Kirk Ferentz who, the guys run out the tunnel.
He makes it
TJ
about
Flex
the team.
leading him out there with the smoke, with the fist raised. Oh, okay, that's great to be a rah coach and running up and down the sidelines, but it's not about you. It's about the players. It's about them. Let them have that moment.
Exactly.
Whatever.
Okay, enough about Minnesota. We're going to get our pick back this year and guarantee that. Maryland is next on the list. Mike Loxley, 5th season. I think he's got Maryland traveling or going in the right direction. They finished the season up really strong last year.
Yeah.
They were 8-5. They won the Music City Bowl. They are going to start a new quarterback. Tua Tagovailoa is gone.
Tulia.
Pronounces Tulia. Yeah, Tulia.
Tagovailoa.
Okay, you got it. They are returning 7 defensive players from last year's team, so they'll be pretty solid on D. What more do you say about Maryland? They're going to probably benefit the most for not having conference divisions, so they won't have to play Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State every year.
Here's the thing that I've noticed about Maryland, and I agree he's got him trending in the right direction, but I also think that the biggest issue I have that's held Maryland back is they're undisciplined at times. They're very undisciplined at times, and that has cost them games in the past that they should have won. And he's got to. That's a direct reflection of your coach when you're undisciplined. And I think that's the biggest drawback, in my opinion, to Mike Loxley is he doesn't instill that in them, and they tend to be a little more free with their actions, let's say, and it does cost them. When they get that cleaned up, I think they're a very quality team. They've proven that they're a good team. They got good athletes out there, so
I think definitely trending in the right direction.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm not sure they'll be better than 8-5 this year or not. We'll see. I really looked at their schedule. I think their schedule is actually not too bad.
I haven't looked at it either.
I haven't looked at it really close. Next up is Washington. Okay. Jed Fish is in his first year. If I remember, did he come from Arizona?
I think so. He turned them around.
He did, and he seemed like a well-spoken individual. From what I saw, I didn't know who he was. I don't know that I'd ever even put a face to the name, to be honest. Arizona is not something we see out in the mid-states very often.
No.
They've got 28 transfers. They're going to be starting 21 out of 22 new starters. They will not have. They just have one returning starter. They had a lot of mass exodus last year. They retired for graduation and also transfers. They were 14-1. They were the runner-up for the national championship game to Michigan. Entirely a new coaching staff from the ground up. Everything's brand new.
Pretty much a new team.
They are introducing 46 new players.
Yeah.
So a lot of them
that's going to be a step back.
A lot of them that were backups did. Some of them stayed to finish out the 85 scholarships. But I don't look for a lot out of Washington. I do think they won't be bad. I think they're just that program
6-6 type of team.
6-6 maybe, and that would be the ceiling. Maybe 7 if everything falls right. I don't know if they'll get 7 wins. That seems like quite a bit with the schedule they've got. So
important to note that, like you said, 46 of their 85 scholarship players. Important to note that after this year, they were going to increase the scholarship limit to 105,
and no more walk-ons.
Which
that's
disappointing. Too bad.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, next up is Indiana. Now, I do have stuff to say about Indiana. Kurt Cignetti is in his first season, replacing Tom Allen. They were 3-9 and 23. They added 31 scholarship transfers. That's the most in the Big Ten. But watching Kurt Cignetti, he's going to get it. He's going to get beat up. He's going to get beat up a lot. And most coaches come in and they talk about wanting to compete and putting their best foot forward and always working and trying hard and being determined. This guy went above and beyond that, I think. I think he came in and just basically said, we're going to win day one, period, which is great. That's good to have that. But he also he had he was
Arrogance
maybe
about
the
it.
most arrogant guy of all of the teams that were out there. And he has probably the least reason to be arrogant. I look for them to be 18th, dead last. I just don't see Indiana doing anything. And he come on there, and if you go back and watch it, people, the listeners, go back and watch his introduction. You're going to say, who the hell does this guy think he is? He's coming into this league, and he thinks he's going to walk on people. He's not. He's going to go 3-9, 3-9, 3-9, and they're going to kick him out, and he's going to be coaching a high school team. That. I think that's the reality of him.
So is the fate of most Indiana coaches.
You can come in and have all these accolades, and you coach this team, that team, or whatever to 10-win seasons. You're not doing that in the Big Ten.
Where was he coaching at before? Was it Liberty or James Madison?
James Madison. And they were good. Don't get me wrong, but they don't play in the Big Ten.
They played in a weak conference. Yes,
absolutely. He thinks he's going to come into the Big Ten and start ruling the roost. He's wrong. He's 100% wrong.
There was another coach that thought that, coming from a smaller school, coming from a non-Power 5 school, who lit it up and over at Nebraska a few years ago and found out that wasn't going to be the case. And he had Power 5 experience. This guy, I don't know. I've never heard of him. I know I've heard of him as a coach, but I don't know. Did he ever played or anything? I don't know what his background is.
Do yourself a favor and find it on YouTube. Go back to his introduction or on the Big Ten Network somewhere online and watch his introduction, and you'll be like, what in the world is this guy trying to do? He's trying to make every team in the Big Ten mad at him, and he's doing a good job of it.
Hey.
So we'll see.
Like the hands that feed.
I was always kind of like Indiana's kind of one of them, whatever. Now it's like, you know what? I wouldn't even care if Ohio State knocked you out 77-0 at this point. Well, you need a reality check, buddy.
I feel that way about their football team just because that's the way I feel about their basketball team. So they kind of get football team gets a bad rap because I don't like the basketball team.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, enough about Indiana. I don't look for them to do much. Like I said, 18th. I think they're not going to do well.
That just leaves one team left, right?
That leaves the national champion Michigan Wolverines as the only team left. Team number 18 of the 3 days. Sharon Moore is in his first season as a head coach, although he was a substituted head coach a couple
interim a few games,
about 4 or 5 times whenever Harbaugh would get suspended, which was normal. Seemed like every year he'd be suspended for X amount of games.
Yeah,
they were 15-0 and national champions last year. They were returning one offensive starter.
One offensive
starter.
And that's Donovan Edwards, isn't it? No, he wasn't even a starter, was he?
I don't know.
Well, so I mean, I consider him a starter. He was good enough.
I think it might have been actually Donovan Edwards. They have a new quarterback coming in this year. Don't know. Didn't really say who it was, but they'll have to start a new quarterback, obviously, because the other guy's gone, went to the NFL. I do want to say one thing about Michigan before we get done here. Sharon Moore absolutely might have been the most impressive coach of all the ones that walked out on that stage. He was the one guy that I watched, dressed to the hilt, looked great, impeccable dressed, intense, well-spoken. He's the kind of guy that if you don't want to play for him, there's something wrong with you. There really is. There's something wrong with you. He is a very intense coach, and also he's the kind of guy that you'd want to play for. I just was thoroughly impressed by him. I didn't really know that much about him. I knew that he'd taken over a couple times when Harbaugh was gone, and he did a good job. I just had never really heard him speak. I'd never really saw him in that light before. Wow, he's an impressive dude. He really is.
He's got a big task,
Congratulations, Michigan. That's a good hire.
He's got a big task because, as you said, there's not a lot of. I don't want to say there's not a lot of talent returning, because there is a lot of talent returning, but there's not a lot of experienced talent returning.
So, yeah, and a lot of the pundits have Michigan sitting about 4th in the league. I didn't have them that high. I thought, well, they're
I didn't either.
returning one offensive starter. I thought that they would maybe take a little bit of a step back offensively, especially in a defensive league. I
probably had them
I had
six.
them right after Iowa.
I had
I had Iowa fourth and Michigan fifth, USC sixth. That's how I had them. Time will tell on that. I
Yeah.
don't know how that's going to come out. Nobody does at this point. The key injury to somebody here or there could derail a season from first team. There could be suspensions. There could be just anything could come along that derails it. Anybody that says they know how it's going to come out now is just
Well,
out trying
if
to
you know how it's
BS
going to turn out now, then you better put some money down on somebody real quick.
Exactly. Yeah. Give me some lottery numbers so I can go out and win the
Yeah.
lottery. But other than that, that's the last one, and that's all I have for media days. Do you have more you want to talk about Michigan?
The thing I was going to say about Michigan is I agree. I see them taking obviously a step back from a national championship. They're not going to be a national championship team this year, and that's not a knock on the coach or anybody that's there right now. It's just it's a fact that when you have one returning offensive starter, you're probably going to take a step back, especially considering the talent that they had. And they also lost some talent on the defensive side. So, and again, it's Michigan. They're replacing talent with talent. It's just inexperienced talent. So I see that. But I had them sixth in the conference, but I also had Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa as 11-1s, 10-2s, 12-0 type of teams, and Michigan and USC are like 9-3 to 10-2 teams. So I'm not saying that sixth place in the Big Ten is going to be 8-4, 7-5. You're still going to be a really, really good team, and you're going to probably make a high quality bowl, Capital One Bowl or something to that effect, but not going to be a New Year's Six or whatever they call them now, or a playoff game. And yes, that's the Hawkeye cat back there walking through.
Yeah. Well, if you go back about 5 episodes of Punting is Winning podcast, I think or at least I did. I went through and did WNL on all the teams in the Big Ten. So you can go back and look at that and see how I predicted that things would turn out. Like I said, I predicted every game or every team, including non-conference. And then
I said I wasn't going to do it until after the Big Ten road trips.
So your day is coming. So get ready for it.
Yep.
Next week, we're going to go through our all-time Kirk Ferentz defense.
Yeah.
We had alluded to this last week that we're going to skip a week, going to cover media days, and then we're going to do that. And
this might be the toughest show to do.
That one's going to be difficult. In fact, I've already started, but I've already scratched out and started over. So,
it's going to be hard to pick just the two deep. Yeah,
it's going to be tough.
But
so
we can do it. I mean, that's if you're a coach, you'd have to do it. Couldn't have 20 guys out there at one time. So, yeah, he wants to be on camera today.
I guess.
So yeah, let's wrap it up with the question of the week. A new question of the week. We want to know, since Hayden Fry, prior to Hayden Fry, let me rephrase that. Prior to Hayden Fry taking over at Iowa, what year and who was coaching Iowa when they had their last winning season? And I'll tell you what, you got to go back a ways.
Yeah,
it's the only hint I'll give you.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, we had to look this one up too. I thought of the question and I thought, well, I kind of wonder myself. So I went back and I had to scroll a ways
back
to get back to a winning season for Iowa.
We will say that the year before that last winning season, they were 8-1.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you any hint.
This is a winning season. This is not 500. So they did have a couple of 5-5 years, but we're talking about seasons where they actually were above 500. So they had to have at least one more win than they had a loss. So that's a winning season.
They even had a couple of 3-3-2s in there, or at least one. I know I saw 3 wins, 3 losses, 2 ties. That's a kiss in your sister season.
Yeah, there were some not great years.
Yeah,
some dark days of Iowa football.
I'm glad that I wasn't necessarily alive and being a fan at that point. So,
Well, I was so young when most of that happened that
well, you weren't even born when it
I
happened.
wasn't born,
Yeah.
but I did. I was born and lived through some of the more bad seasons, I guess would be the
Yeah.
easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
But they were still bad before I ever showed up. Some of them.
Yeah. Well, until Hayden Fry showed up.
Yeah.
So, well, with that, let's wrap it up. As always, catch us on YouTube. You're watching us here on YouTube. You can catch us also in the car on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Catch us on Facebook. Hunting is winning. Having some troubles with getting the clips on Twitter, or not on Twitter, but on TikTok. Still trying to work that bug out. My account's not allowing it to take, so eventually I'll probably have to just create a new one or something just to get those out there. And then also catch us on. You can catch our link on Twitter as well, or X, or whatever you want to call it. I still call it Twitter. But yeah, as always, if you like the content you see here, like and subscribe. Throw some comments in there. Be a part of the show. If you want to be, anything as far as, we talked about it earlier. You want us to throw you a shout out on a question or something, or if you have a question that you want us to ask, hey, we'll be happy to ask that as a question of the week, or something maybe you want us to try to talk about. More than happy to do that.
Why don't y'all comment on the cat back there?
Yeah, she's been in my office all day long, so she's ready to get out. So
I had some scratching at my door too. The dog was wanting.
Yeah. Anyway, with that, we'll end everything on a rousing Go Hawks, and we'll talk to you next week.
Go Hawks.